Welcome to Grant Writing for Beginners, brought to you by the Grant Writing Help Desk. Welcome, my name is Pat Gross. I am the founder of the Grant Writing Help Desk, and today I bring to you over 30 years of experience in the field of grants from both sides of the fence, both here in Australia and over in the UK and Europe. I've been involved in all aspects of funding, from designing the program guidelines and selection criteria to applying for funding for clients. In this information session, we're going to cover what grants are and how to go about them, and it's all about mindset, where to start looking, what resources are available to guide your application, what's involved in a grant application, how you can plan ahead, and getting help. So let's start with what grants are and how to go about them. And by doing this, we are addressing the number one reason why people aren't successful with their grant submissions. The number one reason why especially new applicants fail is quite simply this: they ask for what they want. It's not about what they want. This is how it works. You've got your binoculars and you're looking out on the landscape and you find a problem, an issue, a challenge, an opportunity. It's going to create change and it's going to improve life, improve your market, improve your business, whatever. The problem is, even though you've got the resources on the ground, you've got the time, but you don't have the money. Now it just happens to be that somebody in their ivory tower is looking over the same challenge or opportunity that you are. And guess what? They've got a big plan. They've got maybe a 5 or a 10-year plan, and they've got the money. But what they don't have are the resources on the ground. So what you are doing is you're going to these ivory towers and you're saying, hey, we've got this idea, this is what we can do, and this is how it's going to benefit you, your idea, or what you want to achieve. We're going to help to contribute to the outcomes that you're looking for. And we know that because you've put something out there, maybe a plan. It could be your guidelines. And in there you've talked about your objectives and you've talked about your outcomes. Hey, we can help you achieve those outcomes, and this is how much it's going to cost. Now the people in the ivory tower will be looking for a number of small interventions to create the big impact. So you could be successful in putting your application together as a pitch to get their attention and to get your idea as a priority, and one that stands out, that they're willing to invest in because they see the potential. So what you then do is you then enter into a treaty. In other words, a funding agreement. And in there, there's the terms and conditions, there's the war plan, there's a campaign blueprint. In other words, it's all the essential ingredients that you need to be able to achieve what they're looking for. So what we've done is put together a mini training program called the Ninja Grant Writing Mindset. And the point of this program is simple, is to help you to get into the right mindset for being able to put together a compelling case for a funding application. We have determined 8 strategies. Choose your target, pick your fight, get inside their head, gather your intelligence, prepare your battle plan and gather your generals and troops. He who wishes to fight must count the cost, take the devil out of the detail, and finally, win first, then go into battle. And I guarantee, if you follow these steps, you will find that you are in the right mindset and be able to use the right language and the right pitch to be able to create a compelling business case that will attract the attention of the assessors of your application. If you want to find out more about this, then go on to the Grant Writing Help Desk and register. In addition to the short program, there is an adjoining manual that walks you through the whole process. Now, with nearly $1 billion worth of grants available in Australia alone, the breadth and range of grants is impressive. But let's start with the low-hanging fruit, the easy ones first. So what we've done, just to inspire you to start looking, is to create a handout called A World of Possibilities. And it's free to download on the Grant Writing Help Desk. So the question is, with nearly $100 billion worth of grant funding available in Australia alone, where do you start looking? Well, if you go onto the Grant Writing Help Desk and look at this section on where to find grants, you will be able to download a free copy of Welcome to the World of Grants, your introductory guide to grant writing. And in there, you will find links to the key government funding sites in Australia and examples of where to go looking elsewhere. So you found a grant that you're interested in applying for. The next question you're wanting to know is what resources are available to be able to support you to put together a really good and compelling application. Basically, what you need to know is how the grants ecosystem works. So here's a summary of the grant writing ecosystem in 6 easy steps. First of all, whether it's from your website or from the guidelines, check to see if there is a policy framework, a strategy plan, or any clue, including some research, that gives you the background as to what the grant is and where it's coming from. What is it the financial instrument for to get to turn the results of a high-level plan into action? If there is a reference to a policy or plan, then read it and be able to understand quite clearly what the objectives are at the higher level. Number 2, which I've already mentioned, is the guidelines. Always when you open the guidelines, the first thing you do is check to see if your organisation structure is eligible to apply for the grant. If not, you may be able to work with somebody who is, or the alternative is not to even start writing, because ineligible means ineligible. Check the timelines, how long the grant is available for, or the timelines in respect to how long it's going to take for the grant, how long the grant is open for, and also an indication of how long it's going to take for the grant process to be finalised. If you've got something that you want to do quickly, but the whole process is going to take 6 months, then there's no point in applying, because they're not going to make it quicker just for you. And the amounts of funding that's available. Yes, it's so easy just to look at it from the perspective of how much can we apply for, but the other thing to check is how much is in the total pool, because if there's not a lot in the total pool, there's an indication there that it could be easily oversubscribed, very competitive, and if they may actually only be looking for a few successful applications as opposed to many. The third part of the ecosystem is the application form itself. Go through the application form with a fine-tooth comb before you start, because there might be some what I call hidden bombs in there, things that are not very clear in the guidelines, but once you get into the application form, it's so easy to find that something in there that could quite easily make you ineligible. Some good examples there is if you've got to produce 2 or 3 years audited accounts and you're a business or an organisation that's not required to be audited, you may find that that sheer word audited could actually eliminate you from the process. And in the application form, it's broken down into the administrivia at the front, so all the information that you need to put in to the application about who you are, proof of your business structure, who the key contacts are, etc. That's something that you could pre-prepare. That's then just a copy and paste basically for any application you put together. The criteria, that's the important bit. And that's the bit that you really need to craft, create the business case. And the questions may all be different, but they're generally asking the same things. So, be able to present your case, the need for your project, why it has to be you, where the gaps are in the market, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who's going to do it, and how you're going to manage it at the top level, the governance structure, and considering the risks. So that's a summary of have a look at the criteria, separate the criteria is my recommendation, so you can really draft them offline and then copy over to the online application form. Budget, obviously the financials is important there. Any attachments or any additional requirements you're going to need. So first thing you do when you've got an application form is check to see whether you need to have things that need to be uploaded. For instance, quotes or plans if you're doing things in the infrastructure area. So have a look at and of course, many applications ask for letters of support. So it's always good to have all this information in train as soon as possible so that you're not trying to put things together at the last minute dependent on the whims of the people that you're trying to get the information from. Because to them it's not as important or as urgent as it is to you. And then finally at the end of the application there's going to be the sign off, and that has to be done by somebody legally who has the authority to apply at that high level, not a middle level manager, because the funders need to know that the whole thing is supported at the top level. Number 4 in the ecosystem is attending briefings. In the olden days it would be getting in the car or train or public transport, travelling down for 1 or 2 hours, then just for the sake of 1 hour meeting, which is usually a standard brief, to text, to a script, and then come away and spend another hour, 2 hours driving. Today we have the luxury of online, so we don't need to do the travel. We can just listen in for that hour or so, ask questions. If we can't, there's usually a recording, and so it's the briefings is background information, and you can ask questions. So check in with the briefings, even if you're tempted not to. But today we have the luxury of being able to get the recordings if we can't attend ourselves, which is now more likely that we can attend without leaving our desktops. Number 5 in the ecosystem is something that's overlooked by some applicants because they're not quite sure what it means. Now, the FAQ, frequently asked questions, is an evolving document. That's the key. If you check out the frequently asked questions document close to the opening of the round, there's only so many questions in there, and these questions are being put together by representatives of the funder who thought about what kind of questions are people going to ask. But in reality, over the process of the application time frame, there is going to be a desk officer that you can contact, and that desk officer, in the interest of probity, will make sure that any curly questions that may be asked by one applicant and they get an answer to, in all fairness, that response needs to be given to the whole world, basically. So disseminate it to everybody who is applying. So what they do is they regularly update the frequently asked questions document. So you may find that there are addenda and the addenda saying, version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And that is basically because they're capturing as much information as possible based on the questions that people have been asking, to give everybody the opportunity to witness what those questions were and what the responses were. In other words, an even playing field. And then number 6 in this ecosphere is previously funded projects. If there's an opportunity, first of all, if this is not the first time this grant has been run, it might be round 2, round 3, round 4, whatever. Have a look at the previously funded projects. Many funders will actually list those projects, and some of them will actually list how much those projects were funded for. So it gives you an idea of the kind of grants that were funded or that they're likely to be funded. But be careful, because conditions may change between one round and another. Now, the question you are now going to ask is what's involved in a grant application. And I previously mentioned every grant is different, yet they're all asking for the same information. What is this information? Well, this may sound a bit repetitive, but it's important. So here goes with the anatomy of a grant application. The front end is the administrivia. My recommendation is, if you're going to apply for a few grants, is to get all this contact information, all the information you need to upload, which may involve the evidence of the kind of organisation you are. So if you're not for profit, you may need an incorporation certificate. Even a business will need evidence of your business name and certificate, etc. If you're a charity, you may need to produce your charity document, or your deductible gift recipient evidence if you are a DGR. Okay, so there is information in there at the front that you would need. Sometimes in the administrivia, they will even ask for your last 2 years' financials. So it's always a good idea to have all this information available so that you can at least get the front end of an application done stressless, basically. There is a section there on criteria, and the criteria will always cover, one way or another, in the questions, the need for the project, and you would need to be very clear, very targeted, and be talked to a 9-year-old who will ask questions and prove it. I used to talk about peeling an onion, so people will say, what's the need? Give me an issue, and I go, what's the need? And then they go, it's usually about what they want to do, and I'll go, what's the need for this? And then they'll tell me, and then I'll go, I'll do it about 5 times if we get to writing. And they'll come to me and say, look, there's 600 people here, and blah, blah, blah. That's the information that you're looking for. How many people are affected by a problem? What is the market crisis, or what's the opportunity? Include the figures, basically, is what I'm trying to tell you. Quantify, not just sort of be wishy-washy. Let's get specific. That's the way that you really demonstrate the need. Outcomes, the results of what you're going to be doing, not just what you're going to do with the outputs, but as a consequence of those outputs, these are the outcomes, and then marry them to the outcomes that the funder's looking for. That's what they're looking for. They're going to be looking for your project plan. My advice there is put it together in stages, because if the funder cannot fund all of what you want to do, by putting your project in stages, they can it makes it easier for them to say, we'll fund up to this amount. Can you find an alternative to the rest, or maybe just bring the project to make it a little bit smaller. Your capability, because this is a risk to them, so you need to show them that you've got project manager in place, that you've got the right tools, the right people, the right resources, so that you can show them that you've got the right, the people on the ground to be able to deliver what you say you're going to deliver. They may be asking questions associated with risk. It might be an obvious, straightforward question that might say, have you considered the risks, and how you're going to deal with them, and you may have to fill in a template, but actually littered throughout the application are clues that they are actually monitoring the risk through the questions, like the capability. How well you answer that question will show them to what level of that they should be worried about the project. Your project plan, to what level should they be worried that you're going to be able to deliver the project. So if you've got a really good plan in place, they know that you've thought about it. If you've got a plan, put together a plan proposal that's basically written on the back of an envelope and has not got much structure, then you're creating risk. The financials of your organisation may be a risk. So there's different things, aspects throughout the application process itself, which isn't obvious, but it's actually demonstrating the level of risk exposure that the funder could have by funding your project activity. Success factors. They want to know how you know that you're going to be successful and how you're going to measure that success. What are you going to do? Right from the beginning, I'd say benchmark, formative, summative. I always say if you're going to measure success, you really need to know where people are or the market is before you start. So they want to show those what you expect the results to be and how you're going to measure what the difference the change has made. The budget, that's always going to be in the application because they want to know where the money's coming from. It might not just be coming from them. Maybe they like to see some contribution from you, whether it's financial or in kind. And maybe there may be other funders. Don't be afraid. Sometimes they prefer to share the risk with others. And it could be that there could be external match funding coming from banks and other resources. So the budget is important, and they also want to see the expenditure. The expenditure must match the story of the narrative. I say that because coming from having worked in a funding body, looking at the budget, sometimes it was glaringly obvious that what they were asking for actually did not relate to what they were wanting to do. Have a look in the application about extra information requirements. Certainly, as I've mentioned, if you've got infrastructure projects, there's quite a few extra bits of information that's wanted. Sometimes they may want your public liability insurance. Sometimes they may be wanting, well, not sometimes, a lot of times they may be wanting quotes for the services that you've put in, or products that you've put into the budget. It could being able to produce evidence of support from the community or the market or stakeholders is really good leverage, especially adding some extra leverage to answering the questions that you don't have the ability to add everything you want to add because of the word limits. Having these extra letters of support telling the stories coming from the community or from the markets, etc., actually adds extra value to your application and extra weighting. And of course, top level sign off. It has to be submitted legally from somebody within the organisation who has the authority to apply for and potentially sign off funding agreements. Now, grants come round in cycles, so you may have the opportunity to plan for the next grant round, and that additional time may be valuable in helping you to put together the evidence that you need. Wouldn't it be fantastic if you could basically have the outline of the questions that may be asked? Remember, I said the questions are different, but they're all asking the same thing. What if you could get all this information together, put it into a business case, and then just put it in the drawer, ready for when something comes along that it would fit with, that what you would need to do was the final touch would be to align what you want to do, remember, with the requirements of the funder and what they're looking for. Wouldn't that be a fantastic idea? This is how you do it. Here's how you can plan ahead. This is how to play the game. First of all, You've got a brilliant idea, but you need to be able to nail the business case. So use the time that you've got before any funding is on the horizon to gather your evidence, to be able to demonstrate that the real need for your application, for what you want to do. Don't leave it till the last minute. Spend some time in gathering the evidence. Secondly, today most funders will leave their guidelines, etc., for grants on the website until the next round, or even a couple, 2 or 3 rounds ahead. Use those rounds and documents as a way to practice what you might put together in the next iteration. Monitoring policy. It's important if you actually find a policy framework, usually lasts around about 3 to 5 or possibly 10 years. So there's likely to be a change or some strategic plans that come from that. A good thing that can happen is to register with ministerial press releases, whether it's federal or state government, or even looking in your local government, their policy framework, the council plans, for example. Monitor these framework plans and policy documents, policy changes, because the funding is the way that the policy becomes practice. So if there's a new strategy plan, read it, dissect it, and just work out where that money is likely to go, and then be able to plan what you want to do. Working in government, this is exactly what I did. My role enabled me to unpack a new plan every 5 years, and in my role to build the capability of the funders that we funded, gave me the opportunity to go out there and design whole professional development programs for these funded organisations to build their capacity to that, and then when the funding came available, they had the ability to be able to respond to what we wanted to achieve in terms of the outcomes that supported the plan. Build a business case, and you can build that in advance. We have got the Get That Grant project planning app. It's free. It's available in the phone stores, the iOS, the Android. You can put it on a mobile phone, you can put it on a tablet, or it's available on the Grant Writing Help Desk and on the Community Entrepreneurs websites as in a template form. The whole premise behind the business case is that you are likely to come up with this brilliant idea, but if you don't do anything about it, it just evaporates. What if you could take the idea from your head, or a couple of people brainstorm it and then write it down? And we've put together a whole process, a chronological process about what the idea is, why do you need to do it, what happens if you don't do it, what are you going to do, who's going to be involved, how much is it going to cost, all those questions. We've put them onto this template. And once you've written out this template, you can email it, you can share it, you can print it. But most of all, you can put it in a drawer, ready for when the grant comes available, and you think, yes, this is going to be a perfect fit. You've already done your homework. Okay, you can plan ahead by looking at the financials, by making sure that you've got your financials in place. Remember I said they were looking for the profit and loss for the previous couple of years. Make sure that you've got your financial statements in order. The permissions. If you're doing or putting a look at applying for an infrastructure grant, for example, many funders won't fund an infrastructure project unless the council permissions, the planning permissions, whatever permissions are in place. Because what's the point of reserving 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, whatever, for this Ute project that cannot get the planning permission? And that funding then could have been used for somebody else. So if you're putting together an infrastructure project, plan ahead by making sure you get the permissions. Also, make sure that you use that time planning ahead for a project to make sure you've got the right project partners. Don't bring them together at the last minute because you've not had the right time to make sure that you are on the right page with the right values and the same level of commitment. So there's a few things that you can do to get ready for when that grant becomes available. Okay, so how do we now get started? Well, if you go to the grant writing help desk at getthatgrant.com, this is a 5-stage system. The first part of it is what grants are. It's important that right from the very start you understand what grants are and what they are not. Once you know what grants are, that helps you then in putting together your grant application. The second area is looking at where to start looking. Then we move on to the do-it-yourself grant writing tools, which are important if you are putting together your own application without help. We have got resources in there, including a DIY grant writing toolkit, which includes checklists and templates to help the solitary grant writer who has got nobody to turn to, just to tick off, go back, make sure that you've crossed the T's, dotted the I's, and you've found those, you've covered those blockages and stuff, those issues that could trip you up in your application. So we've really thought hard about how to support the sole solitary DIY grant writer without the support from the knowledge and the system. The fourth area in the grant writing help desk is how to engage a grant writer or engage in a grant writer, and we have access to grant writers, so it makes it easier and it's more cost effective actually in time to engage somebody who knows what they're doing than to spend hours and hours and hours, and in some cases just feeling like you're just not getting anywhere. Take the stress out of it and engage a grant writer. And then in the fifth area of this system, you can dial up learning and development, and we've got a number of programs, whether it's for the individual, whether it's for an organization, whether it's mentoring. We've got a number of programs again that you can get involved can purchase, and we also do face-to-face training and group training. Just going back to the DIY grant writing blueprint, the grant writing toolkit, just a little bit of a demonstration here. This will help you. This is for the DIY enthusiast in inverted commas. It may not be your choice, you may be the person that has to sit down and put the application together anyway. This is a 4-step system, so we're looking at the pre-planning and preparation to make sure that you have got the capacity to be able to put together the application, and that you may check to see if there's somebody else that's in your group or organisation that has experience that you're not sure about. Share the risk. Get your paperwork in order. Then we look at the steps for applying for the grant, what you need to know, how to build your business case, and what it means for your people, systems and processes, because grants can actually change the ecosystem of an organisation. especially if you find yourself with quite a bit of money and a commitment to a project that may take over your time and resources and detract from other things that you're trying to do in your organisation. So make sure when you're putting together a grant application that you do have the resources and capability to actually deliver, and think about the risks. Then we have that pre-submission checkpoint, which I sort of alluded to, about the checklist, and the checklist about have a look at your rechecking the guidelines around the project plan, the budget, and the governance arrangements, and also the post-submission responsibilities. Just be mindful of the fact that there's a long wait between applying and getting the funding, and what the contractual obligations you should be aware of by getting funded, by signing the funding agreement, because there are implications for the organisation. I'm aware of some not-for-profits, for example, that actually didn't have public liability insurance. And there is actually public liability insurance thresholds, no matter whether you're a business or a not-for-profit. There are some conditions around intellectual property. Who owns what, conditions around marketing, conditions around etc, etc, etc. So we've put this together, a DIY toolkit to help the solitary grant writer. We've now reached the end of this presentation, and we hope that you managed to find some useful information. To find out more, just visit the Grant Writing Help Desk at getthatgrant.com, which has got a lot of free information in there to help you get started. And if you're looking for that little bit more, then book a one-on-one with us. Just go to the bit.ly/grantsbooking link and book an appointment. Thank you very much for joining us on this journey.